Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Orjuela, and today I will be presenting my research on capital punishment, jury accuracy, and crime deterrence. First, I'm going to go over the agenda of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to start with the introduction, move to the description of the problem, touch on the literature review, and then apply the literature to the problem. And finally, I'm going to go over the discussion and the conclusion. Next slide. So starting off, why did I choose this topic? So the two parts of this class I found very interesting were the crime decline section we did before spring break and the jury accuracy section. Additionally, capital punishment is a topic that I wanted to do more research on so I could make a more informed decision about it for myself. It's a topic that I've not really known where I stood, so I want to do more research on it. And next, I'm going to go into why this is important. This is an important topic because people's lives are at stake. America is known for giving people life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, but capital punishment takes away all possibilities of rehabilitation. And for my argument, capital punishment should not be utilized in America because of jury inaccuracy and lack of crime deterrence. Next slide. So now we're going to go over the description of the problem. So capital punishment is still legal in 25 states, and this includes nationally and in the military. The other 25 states that it is not legal in have adopted life in prison without the possibility of parole as an alternative. So as of 2015, 1,414 people have been executed in America's history. With that, another 156 people have been sentenced to death, but have been acquitted or exonerated of their crime while on death row. So doing that math, that's a little over 10% of people who have died. So in America, the burden of proof is high in criminal cases. The jury has to find them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and it is on the prosecutor to bring the evidence forth. So there shouldn't be 10% of people who sit on death row have been found innocent. Additionally, there has been a steady decrease in the use of capital punishment in America. So there was nearly 100 executions in the year 2000, but as of the year 2013, 39 people were executed. So there's been a downwards decline in executions in America. So moving into the literature review, I broke it down into 3 different sections. I'm going to be covering literature about jury accuracy, literature about deterrence, and then finally literature that combines multiple factors into it. So starting off, I'm going to be going over literature about jury and accuracy. So starting off, judges overall seem to agree with the jury's decision. According to Eisenberg et al., judges agree with juries' decisions about 75 to 80% of the time. This also goes into the next factor that juries weigh the facts and evidence heavily in their decision-making. So the evidence and the fact is the highest thing that affects the jury's decision, but this moves into the liberation hypothesis. This says that juries do a good job of weighing the evidence when there's strong evidence towards one side, but when there's moderate evidence, other factors non-related to the case comes into their decision making. This is from Devine and Budenbaum. Next, I want to look at religious effects, since the death penalty has some religious backings to it, and some religions don't think that us as humans or government should have the power to take away someone's life. But the literature pointed out that religion did not have a heavy effect on the outcomes of cases, and when lawyers use the argument about God's mercy in a courtroom, that it does not help their case in the verdict. And then finally, I wanted to go over some other factors that have to do with jury accuracy. So first, male jurors were found to be more likely to convict than female jurors, and higher educated jury members were less likely to convict than their lower educated counterparts. And finally, judges have the highest threshold for conviction. So judges have a stricter standard that they think is guilty, so that means that juries are more likely to find someone not guilty that a judge thinks would be guilty. Now I will be reviewing literature based on deterrence and other factors related to capital punishment. So starting off in this section, Radlett and Akers, as well as Passel, both did research on the deterrence effects of capital punishment, and they both came to the conclusion that there is no general deterrence that stops Americans from committing crime, so knowing the death penalty on the table does not affect crime rates. Additionally, Radlett and Akers also point to the just desserts theory that people support the death penalty because of the retribution that they think is needed. So it's basically the eye for an eye state of mind. And then finally, I want to talk about the Marshall hypothesis. This is a hypothesis that states that Americans in general support capital punishment because they don't have enough education on the matters. They don't know enough about the retribution, morality, public opinion, deterrence, cost, irreversibility, and discrimination related to the problem. Now I will move on to the discussion. First, I would like to go over the implications of jury accuracy. For the most part, they do a generally good job of finding someone innocent or guilty. Although this isn't the gold standard, judges tend to agree with juries 75 to 80% of the time, and juries weigh evidence and facts heavily in their decision making. So there's no perfect science to decide if the jury made the right or wrong decision, but the fact that judges agree with them for the most part should have a weight. Judges are experts in the law field, so their decisions should have some indication that the jury is making the right or wrong decision. Additionally, evidence should weigh heavily because that's what the jury should be focusing on when making their decision. The problem there is that the death penalty is permanent. Once the execution happens, there's no going back, no matter what evidence is brought to light. The 156 people exonerated from death row is a very high number, and if they weren't, those would have been innocent people executed. So next, the liberation hypothesis points to the fact that weaker evidence can lead to juries being affected from unrelated variables to the case, like race, gender, age. On top of that, the makeup of the jury can be an advantage or a disadvantage to either side. Men are more likely to convict, and more educated people are less likely to convict. Variables from the jury should not have the power to decide if somebody should live or die. Next, I will discuss the implications of the lack of deterrence effects. The literature agrees that the death penalty does not have a general deterrence effect on society. It merely incapacitates the individual from committing further or future crimes, but it does not stop others from committing crimes. The just desserts theory points out that the death penalty is used for retribution, an eye for an eye, as some would say. And then the Marshall hypothesis also indicates that people are not informed or educated enough on the issue to make an informed decision. This indicates that the death penalty is utilized to punish an individual for their crime. My solution to this problem would be to make capital punishment illegal in all 50 states and in the military, and then to transfer over to the sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. So this would help with the problems of the jury inaccuracy and the implications that there's a lack of deterrence effects from the death penalty. So first, with the jury inaccuracy, if the jury does make a wrong decision if some of the variables happen that causes the jury to lean one way or the other, then the person's not losing their life, and there's a possibility that they could be released. Also, they're still being rehabilitated while they're in prison serving the sentence. From a lack of deterrence effect, since it is shown that the severity of the punishment does not have a general deterrence effect on the community or the society in a whole, there's the same incapacitation effect between life in prison without the possibility of parole and the death penalty. They're both taken out of society where they can't do harm to the innocent public. In conclusion, my argument for this presentation was that capital punishment should not be utilized in America because of jury inaccuracy and lack of criminal deterrence. Although it is on a decline, capital punishment is still legal in half the states. So throughout this project, I reviewed literature on jury accuracy and crime deterrence effects that capital punishment has. And through this, my recommendation is that capital punishment should be made illegal in America, and that all the states that still allow it should enact life in prison without the possibility of parole instead. This concludes my presentation. Thank you guys all for your time, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I will respond.